you still do roll?
Yeah. Commissioner Sparks,
Present.
Commissioner Berman,
Here.
Commissioner Gilardi, Vice Chair Long,
Here.
Chair Moffett.
Okay, and next up is the land acknowledgement. Please stand for that. The City of Cotati recognizes that we're on the ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have been stewarding and maintaining a relationship on this land as knowledge keepers for millennia. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a gesture of respect to the land we are on. And next is the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, can get a motion for the approval of the last minutes.
I motion to approve.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Director House, have there been any changes to the agenda since?
No
it was-
changes this evening.
Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is the public comment, oral or written communications. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the commission on any items listed on the matters at hand, or any matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission may do so at this time. If anybody is interested in speaking on any items that are not on the agenda tonight, now would be the time to do that. Carla, any Zoom attendees?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Long. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon or dial *9. And Vice Chair Long, that will end public comment.
Thank you. All right. Matters at hand. So we have the Santero Way and TOC rezoning ordinance, a draft of that we're going to be looking at tonight. Are you presenting, Director House?
Yeah, I'm presenting tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair Long, members of the public for coming tonight, commissioners. As mentioned, tonight's item 7A on the agenda is the transit-oriented communities and Santero Way rezoning. I do apologize. I have a number of slides on this. It's kind of a extended topic. There's a lot of information to get through. I will try to do it efficiently, and then I'm happy to answer any questions to clarify on anything that's not clear or that people would like to get more detail on. And we'll see if I can get the slides to advance. Carla, I think you'll have to advance for me. Go to the next slide. So just to summarize the project description, we're considering a recommendation to the City Council on an ordinance to implement the Santero Way specific plan and transit-oriented communities policies on certain properties within a half-mile radius of the SMART station, and some are proposed to be incorporated citywide. To summarize these policies, they would or implement a residential density of 25 to 35 units to the acre, a commercial floor area of either 1.0 or 3.0, provide a maximum of 1.5 or 1.5 spaces per residential unit or 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of commercial use, so that's 1 space per 250 square feet. It's worth noting that's a standard commercial parking requirement, but it would not allow any minimum parking requirements, so that's a maximum. And then it would also implement a number of protection, production, and preservation policies regarding housing, and I'll get more into details on that. Going to the next slide. The proposal would also include policies regarding commercial stabilization, parking management, station access and circulation, and then lastly, we're gonna also propose some cleanup to other areas of the code regarding the definition of tattoos, tobacco stores, micro distilleries, and vintage clothing, and to codify an amendment process. So again, those are just cleanup items separate from the intent of the main ordinance, but as we talk about, anytime we're doing an ordinance work to rewrite the zoning code, if there's little discrepancies or things we need to clean up, we often take advantage of that, and I'll get into the details on what's exactly proposed. We'll go to the next slide. So just kind of starting out at a high level, a number of state laws have been passed, primarily starting in 2015, but really getting going in 2017 regarding housing that have kind of forced the city to do a number of things. I tried to find a summary of how many bills had actually been passed since that time. And ChatGPT actually told me it couldn't provide that number. I think it's because there's so much change in the housing legislation, but since 2017, I have confirmed there's been over 100 bills passed at the state level that have affected what we do with housing here at local levels of the city and the county. And primarily the trends of what those have been pushing to do is to remove or reduce local control, to limit the amount of parking cities can require, and particularly near transit, to allow certain types of affordable housing projects to develop by right, which essentially skips the public process and just goes straight to building permits. Cities are expected to support a certain amount of housing development, and including affordable housing. And then lastly, which is the category we're here to talk about tonight, there's been a lot of push to kind of intensify development around train stations or just high-use transit with the goal of trying to allow more housing and more commercial activities around transit. And those called transit-oriented communities is the name of those policies. And we'll go to the next slide. The commission has seen this slide before. This is a slide that put together by an artist that shows all of the housing bills that were proposed in April of 2025. That's just this year. These did not all pass, but I like to put this slide in housing presentations because it kind of shows the theme of the state really pushing a lot of laws down on local jurisdictions and things that we have to jump through, whether we're San Francisco or we're Cotati. All cities are expected to kind of respond and react to these in different ways. Again, not all these passed, but I just like the context because it really is telling of kind of the context of what we're dealing with at the local level regarding kind of some of these state mandates. We'll go to the next slide. So getting into the background of how we got here tonight, in August of 23, the city initiated the Santero Way Specific Plan Update. The commissioners and some of the public members may remember that Santero Way is in a specific plan that was adopted in 2001 when a lot of the North Bay properties were seen as this future telecom hub. Nokia was the #1 cell phone company in the world, and there was a lot of speculation about the North Bay becoming the next kind of area where a lot of telecommunication companies would expand in their offices and all of those things. And then shortly and later in 2001, the iPhone was invented, and all of that speculation seemed to have changed direction. But the specific plan did get adopted, and it envisioned Santero Way as an office mixed-use neighborhood with a lot of commercial and light industrial development. You fast forward, now or in 2023, so 20 years later, about 100 homes had been approved, about 200 homes had been approved and built, and about another, I think it was 100 homes were built and 100 were approved, but none of the office development had happened on Santero Way. And we were dealing with all of these transit-oriented community policies getting pushed down on us at a local level. So we took a project to rewrite all of the rules for that neighborhood, that Santero Way specific plan. Many of you might have got notices about that. We had a lot of meetings. And in April of 2024, because we realized that these transit-oriented policies were coming down and that weren't aligned with what we were doing in Santero Way, we expanded the EIR that analyzed all the environmental impacts of redoing that neighborhood plan to include a broader area within a half-mile of the train station, because that's the radius that the state is telling us is going to apply to transit-oriented policies, or at least that we need to look at. So in February of 2025, the Santero Way specific plan update was approved by the city council. Later on that year, or this year, the state, or ABAG MTC, which is kind of the Bay Area higher level of government, finalized their transit-oriented community policy, directing us as to what their expectations are. And so we initiated an effort to rezone, or kind of take the next step with the Santero Way specific plan to really finalize those rules, and then also look at those other parcels that are within that half-mile radius but are outside of the Santero Way neighborhood, and I'll show a slide that shows what properties those are. We had a neighborhood meeting here on June 25th, sent out notices to a lot of the same folks who received them tonight. And then on September of this year, and September 15th and September 23rd of this year, we had a meeting here with the Planning Commission and then with the City Council at a workshop format to present the ideas, gather input, and finalize the proposal before we brought it back tonight for a recommendation. And it's worth noting, no decisions are being made tonight, but the Planning Commission is going to make a recommendation, and that recommendation will be brought back to the City Council for their review and a decision, and that is scheduled for November 18th. So we'll be back here with the City Council on November 18th for them to make a decision on this, and we'll bring all the comments we hear tonight from the community members along with the recommendation from the commission for the City Council to consider. We'll go to the next slide. So this is a map that shows the half-mile radius around the train station. The train station is that little blue and white circle in the middle. There's a lot of information on this slide, so I'm going to walk through it. One of the unique things about Cotati, as I'm sure most people in the room know, is a lot of Cotati is completely surrounded by the city of Rohnert Park. And so if you look at the black dash line there, that's actually the Cotati city limits as it fits into that half-mile radius around the SMART station. So a majority of the property within that half-mile radius is actually in the city of Rohnert Park, and none of the rules that we're going to talk about tonight or changes are proposed to affect any of those Rohnert Park parcels. But it's just good to know that we're kind of in a unique situation because the Cotati train station also serves a lot of Rohnert Park residents. The parcels that are surrounded in yellow are the Santero Way specific plan parcels. So those are all the hash marks, parcels in blue and green, but that are surrounded by the yellow outline. And then as you head further west on the slide, you'll see some additional hash mark parcels. And those are the parcels that are within the half-mile radius outside of the Santero Way specific plan, but that are also proposed to be under this transit-oriented communities, or TOC, set of rules. It's worth noting that those are all of the commercial parcels on East Cotati Avenue. None of the parcels that are on East Cotati Avenue that are zoned residential or developed with a residential property are proposed to be included in any of the rule changes tonight, other than those that are in Santero Way. So it's just worth noting that. We'll go to the next slide. This is the same slide, but just kind of taking an aerial photograph of the neighborhood and highlighting which properties are in the Santero Way specific plan. Those are the yellow ones, and it's the SMART label is there up there at the kind of top right. That's the SMART station. And then the blue parcels are the commercial properties that are proposed to be affected by the rule changes today. And down at the bottom left, you'll see that's Oliver's in that bottom left corner of that larger rectangle. We'll go to the next slide. So through all of this background work that we've done, we've heard a lot of concerns from the community, especially when we were doing the Santero Way specific plan. The number one thing we heard from community members was parking concerns. I know Santero Way has a lot of parking challenges now. We've been talking about different ways to address those as development moves forward. And we've put some additional things in some of the rules tonight that we think will help with that as development moves on Santero Way. But we heard a lot about parking. Also concerns over the mixes of land uses and how those things would interact, because it is a mixed-use zoning district, so there's commercial and residential in close proximity to each other, and so we need to be thoughtful about what land uses we allow and how impacts from those are going to be managed as land use intensifies in that neighborhood. Obviously, you get more people there, you have to be thoughtful about emergency evacuation routes and access for public safety to be able to get in and out of those properties, and then residents to be able to get in and out. We heard a lot about just kind of the look and feel of Cotati and how the residents in those neighborhoods really like kind of a craftsman style architecture. Cotati has really held on to the craftsman design theme, and that was important to not go really contemporary with the future development that we have in Cotati. Also, it's important to maintain open space and access to parks and just community areas as development happens. Ensuring that we get affordable housing as part of every project that comes forward. And then that we get a mix of ownership and rental units. A lot of people said they didn't want only owners or only rentals as development occurs. And so that's a summary of really what we heard. We did get one written comment tonight that was provided to the commission, and they actually talked a lot about these same issues. So it really is definitely a theme. Parking and kind of mix of impacts and emergency access is the highlights that I would summarize from that comment. We'll go to the next slide. So getting into kind of some of the meat of what's actually proposed with these rule changes. I'm going to kind of talk about the summary high level of what it is that we need to do in order to be deemed compliant with TOC, and talk about how the city thought about making this recommendation, and then we'll get into some of the specifics. It's worth noting that the reason that we are moving forward with this is a large amount of the grant money we get to build out our infrastructure is tied to TOC compliance. And so we get grant money from ABAG NTC, that Bay Area governmental organization I referenced, and that's basically how the federal transportation money flows to Cotati. And what they've said is if we are not compliant with transit-oriented community policies, we're not going to be competitive for that grant money. That's how the city has fixed a lot of our streets and updated a lot of our parks. And so that's the reason why we are moving forward with some of these changes, or recommending that we move forward with some of these changes. Again, they're in 4 categories: commercial and residential density, trying to increase production, preservation, protection of affordable housing, and ensure commercial stabilization, manage parking, and ensure we have good access to the transit and circulation routes around the transit station. Compliance is, this is for the whole Bay Area, so it's based on tiers. We're in the least intense tier in the North Bay, based on our smart station and just the frequency of travel we have at our transit stations. Some of the compliance standards were mandated, so required to be done. That's like the density and the parking numbers that I talked about earlier. Others, we were allowed to review a menu of options, and that's what we did at that workshop with the City Council and the Planning Commission. And that direction we got from that menu is what's informed the proposed changes tonight. Again, this applies to a half-mile radius around the smart station for a lot of the changes, but others we are proposing citywide, specifically because we think there will be benefits, like as a parking management is one example, and I'll talk about that. It's easier to implement some of the rules when you just write one rule, and the staff can look it up and see, okay, here's what the all future developments are required to have a parking management plan versus, are you within the half mile, or are you, over on Redwood Drive or something. And so it's just easier for staff in some ways to implement these policies, and that's one of the reasons why some of them are being recommended to be citywide. We'll go to the next slide. So the compliance strategy, how are we actually proposing to comply? So we're proposing to create 2 new zoning districts, one called Santero Way and one called Transit-Oriented Communities. It's interesting for Santero Way specifically, some of the zoning changes would allow what we're calling an interim use of those existing buildings down at the end of Santero. We heard a lot of concerns about those buildings continuing to be vacant when we were doing the update, and so we figured we added some rules that would allow certain uses to move into those buildings until they redevelop, and then once they redevelop, they have to kind of comply with the standard zoning. It was a way to try to get some active uses in them while the current owners are trying to figure out how they're going to redevelop. And I can answer specific questions on that if there are any. We're proposing to update some of the existing zoning rules to comply, and there's some parking changes and like to stop condominium conversions of apartments is one example, but there's a few other examples and those are highlighted in the code, and I'll get into details on that later. We're proposing to create some new department programs like a business liaison program, and also trying to minimize when code enforcement results in somebody having to move out of a unit to allow them to work with the landlord and us work with the landlord. So landlord has to fix the code deficiencies, but maybe not evict the tenants as a way to do that. Or if they do, the tenant does have to relocate, the landlord would have to pay for that cost while they update their property, and then the tenant would have a right to move back in. So that's not a zoning change, but it's a policy change as to how we're doing our code enforcement effort. This is all going to be updated on the website, and then ultimately we're going to have to submit all of these changes through the ABAG MTC compliance portal, and they're going to review to decide whether or not we actually are compliant or not. And as identified in the staff report, there's like a spectrum of, there's a score. And so the lowest score is around 40 points, and the highest score I think is around 80 points. And that score is going to be determined how competitive we are for grants. We'll go to the next slide. So how did we kind of come up with some of these changes? So obviously a lot of community input, things we heard from the community member. We looked at the city council goals, adopted policies, including the housing element and the budget. We have a work plan in our department, so we also look for areas where we could, focus on things we were already committed to doing. Obviously, sometimes there's a state mandate, and so if we're going to have to do it anyway, we might as well take credit for it. And then funding availability and commitment timelines was a big one. And this chart, I'm sorry, it's hard to read, but getting back to that menu of options, in some options, rather than change the rules, the state said, oh, you can contribute money as a way to comply, but for the production policy, that would have been $1 million over 4 years, so $250,000 a year. For the preservation, it would have been $500,000, so that's $125,000 a year. And then for the protection, it would have been $100,000 or $25,000 a year. And of course, all of these rules got finalized after we had already adopted our 2-year budget. And so going back to redo the budget wasn't really an option that the city council directed staff to explore further. Go to the next slide. So getting into residential production. So we have to choose 2 of these. Staff, based on the direction from the commission and the council, chose production policy 4, and that's to use the 120 East Cotati Avenue site. That's the vacant site across from the fire station. The city purchased that. We're proposing, partnering with a developer to build affordable housing on that site. And we're proposing to take credit for that because that's already something that had been committed to and was in the works. And so we want to take credit for that for production policy number 4. And then number 6, to streamline our entitlement processes. So entitlement, it's kind of the permitting process. We're already subject to a state law, SB 330, and that expires at the end of this decade, and so in 2030. And so ABAG MTC said that if we want to make those permanent, then that's a way that we can comply with this area of TOC production, or housing production. From the staff perspective, we're already doing that. It's a pretty straightforward process. We understand it, so it seemed like a relatively low-hanging fruit to get compliance. There's a note here. We already require 15% of our projects to be affordable housing, even if they're market rate projects. So there's a chance we could comply with that, but it has a average affordability level of 80% of the area median income, which is considered low income. We may not be able to comply with that, so we're going to explore those options, but just know we do have kind of a back pocket way to propose to comply if we don't score high enough with these other two ways. So just that's a note. We'll go to the next slide. So for preservation, we're proposing to not allow existing apartment buildings to be converted to condominiums without at least new apartments being built somewhere else, or the tenants being allowed to have the first right of refusal to buy those apartment or those condominiums at their affordability level of what they're paying. So that's a proposal, and it's 17.30.082 is the code change that you have in your packet if you want to review the language. And then we're proposing our current mobile home preservation zoning language as a way to comply with the second policy that we're required to. And then just another note, we do have some of our code enforcement changes we think could also comply, but we're not sure. So that's another back pocket way that we could gain further compliance if we don't, either these two don't get supported, or we get kind of scored low for how we're proposing to comply by ABAG MTC. We'll go to the next slide. So under protection, there's a no net loss and a right to return to demolished homes. So what that essentially means is if a developer buys a lot and it's got a couple existing houses on it, they want to demolish those homes and build a new apartment project, the current residents have to have the right to come back and rent those units, or have a first right of refusal to buy those units, and also at the affordability level of the current tenants. That's codified. There's some red line changes that are in your packet for that. And then also rent stabilization. We're proposing to use the current mobile home park rent stabilization code to comply. And we think that's adequate, but if it's not, we have the preventing displacement from code enforcement activities in our back pocket, just in case we want to kind of take another approach to how we comply. So we'll go to the next slide. And then commercial stabilization. So in addition to housing, they're pushing some business support. And how we're proposing to comply with that is we're going to have a small business advocate to help business owners deal with issues. Basically, rather than getting bounced around from different departments, we'll assign somebody from the community development department to kind of shepherd you or hold your hand through a process as you try to resolve whatever challenge or issue you bring to us. Basically a way to have kind of a one point of contact versus talk to 3 or 4 different departments if you're trying to resolve a certain issue. We'll go to the next slide. So here's some of the specifics. Under TOC, we cannot have any parking minimums, so 0 parkings per unit and per square foot for commercial, and then a maximum of 1.5 spaces per unit and 4 spaces per 1,000 as talked about. We have to allow shared parking between different land uses, so if you have a mixed-use project with housing and commercial, we have to allow those 2 uses to share parking. We already do that. We have to allow unbundled parking, so someone could rent a house and not pay for a parking space. That's a mandate from ABAG MTC. It's not a flexible one. If we don't choose to do that, we can say we don't want to do that, but we'll just get dinged on our score. I will say what's being proposed tonight to the commission and to the community is trying to get the highest score we can, so 100% compliance. So if there's some direction to not go for 100%, I still think we would be relatively competitive in our grant scoring. And then we're making some minor changes to the bicycle parking requirements to require 1 space per apartment and 1 space per 5,000 square feet. I'm sorry, you can't see that, but that's what's behind the text there. We'll go to the next slide. And then we needed to have some flexible policy options, again, from a menu. And what we're proposing is to make some changes to the code to allow future development. So when somebody builds a new apartment building, to just be thoughtful about the fact that some people are going to be taking Ubers and rideshare. There's going to be Amazon delivery trucks. There's going to be Uber Eats delivery cars showing up. There's going to be all these different things pulling up, and we want them to make a dedicated space for all of those different things, not just ignore it. So be thoughtful about it and make it convenient and flexible for all those different uses to compete for that curb space, not just put parking there or a red curb. We'll go to the next slide. So for station access and circulation, we're primarily compliant with our current rules, but we are proposing to require new development to incorporate what's called mobility hub planning. So that's basically trying to just be thoughtful when you're right next to a train station about the fact that people are going to be showing up there. Some people are going to take an Uber, some people are going to ride their bike, some people are going to drive their car, some people might want to rent a car. Just be thoughtful about all those competing ways that people are going to come and go from that space and plan for it in your new design. So similar to the curb management. We'll go to the next slide. So lastly, as I talked about, we like to take advantage to clean up some of the code. So as we talked about before, currently tattoo studios are kind of put in what's called a personal services restricted category. It's kind of an older perspective on tattoo uses, and it classifies them like as a pawn shop or a fortune teller or something that communities historically had concerns over. Tattoo studios have become much more mainstream in retail, and accepted, and so we're proposing to change the tattoo studio land use to be similar to like a hair salon. So they would be allowed almost anywhere in Cotati, whereas right now they're allowed almost nowhere in Cotati. So we've had a lot of tattoo businesses try to open up in town, and our one we have in town would like to expand, and they keep running into restrictions and they can't move. So we got a letter from them, the commission reviewed that letter, and we are trying to respond to that because we don't see it as a concern, and we haven't heard from the community much about that being concerning. For tobacco stores, as we talked about, right now we don't have them defined in our code, and so that causes problems. We actually don't allow tobacco shops, or smoke shops is what you would call them. So we do have 2 in town, and they're allowed, and they would be called what's called existing non-conforming. Some people call that grandfathered in. They're currently already grandfathered in, but when we have new people come to the counter and ask to open up a smoke shop and we tell them you can't, it's not clear in the code why not, and so we're just trying to make some clarity so that way it makes that conversation a lot easier. The commission provided some direction to ensure that we had micro distilleries and vintage clothing sales built into the code as a land use, so there's some changes to allow that. And then lastly, staff is proposing to codify or write the rules for how we amend the zoning code. We're here to do that tonight, but actually if you look in the code, it doesn't tell you how to do it, which is pretty surprising actually. Every city writes up a process that we have to follow in order to change our own rules or to allow somebody else to propose to change those rules. Currently, Cotati's code doesn't do that. And so this is a cleanup measure that we are just trying to define that process and tell people how they propose to change the rules, and then also to follow it ourselves. So with that, we will go to the last slide. And it's recommended by the Community Development Department that the Planning Commission consider the proposed Cotati Municipal Code changes to implement the TOC policy requirements, and recommend that the City Council adopt an ordinance to implement them after conducting a public hearing and providing direction to staff. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Director Hausch. Any questions from the commission at this time?
It's not so much a question, more just a clarification. So we don't have parking minimums established with the transit-oriented communities, right? But that doesn't mean that new developments won't have parking, right? It's just we can't force them to include parking? That's
correct. So now our zoning code has both a minimum and a maximum amount of parking, and this essentially just says let the market decide. I've not heard any developer in our market who wants to build housing without providing any parking. But the 1.5 space per unit is, I'm assuming, probably where they will go.
Okay, thank you.
Can you elaborate more on the funding that we receive from ABAG as being, when we apply for those grants, and kind of the amounts, how much we've gotten over, a year or 2 years?
Yeah, so I was struggling to kind of quantify the exact amount, but it's between $500,000 and $1 million a year is the average as over the last, I think, 7 years is the data that I looked at. And our overall city budget is about $10 million. So it's about, 5 to 10% bump above our current annual budget. And it's really been key in a lot of the repaving projects we've done and the basically a lot of the road maintenance projects that we've done. Some of the sidewalk gap closure projects got some of that. I heard, someone told me, and I haven't confirmed this, that the basketball court repaving over here was benefited from that. So it has been a big contributor, and the city manager and the public works director both identified it as really key to us being able to keep our infrastructure going.
Just kind of on that same topic, are there restrictions on how that money can be spent?
I do believe so. Every year it's a little bit different, so this gets into kind of like, funding streams, and it starts, a lot of this is federal money that flows through the, what's called the Council of Governments, so the ABAG MTC, the Bay Area government. Then it flows to Sonoma County Transit, and then Sonoma County Transit allocates it to all the different jurisdictions. Most of the major infrastructure improvements you've seen throughout the county had Sonoma County Transit money in them. I don't know how much of that is this one Bay Area grant money versus other streams. It gets really complex really quick, and that's not something our department does.
We will open it up to the public for comments at this time. So if you have any questions or comments on the item that was just presented, now would be the time to do it. I think we allocate 3 minutes to individuals, so yes. Come on up. If you don't mind just saying your name.
Gary Bradley, property owner on East Cotati. Two things. I noticed the radius in red. Is that a half-mile radius already? What does that represent? So you're trying to go beyond the half-a-mile radius for the TOC, is what I'm...
Sorry, yeah, so I missed that. That graphic was old. Nothing past the half-mile radius is proposed. That graphic did show some other lots that we were looking at when we were doing the Centero Way. There's nothing proposed outside the half-mile radius for those specific properties.
So the ones that are hash marked?
Correct.
'Cause I have, one of them
Yeah.
is mine.
Yeah.
That's
So
why
the
I'm
ones that
here.
are hash marked outside the half-mile radius are not included
Oh, okay. So it's not a proposal?
for
You're not
those
trying to
parcels.
propose it in, okay.
Correct.
So, the other thing is, how are you plan on, with the labor being a federal job, that you would have to typically, use, union scale, and that's shot down a lot of, projects trying to come into the affordable housing. Do you see them, they've been backdooring us for a long time with these bonds, and a lot of ways to go around things that are getting voted down. So I'm kind of curious what your thought is in that without taxing more to this town.
Yeah, so, through the chair,
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's, what kind of projects are you referring to specifically? Are you referring to the private developments that would be built?
Just
like the
in
housing?
general, the development in general, that they talked about,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a 9-story building without parking, that's kind of a rattler, to even think that. But just trying to get those built that way, and they've been shot down. It doesn't pencil out.
Mm-hmm.
That's history with the state, with this whole system, and I've read up on it.
yeah,
So I was kind of curious, what's your angle going to be this time, knowing that, nobody wants to get any more taxed. We feel like we're getting taxed pretty good.
Right.
yeah, so
And,
just to be
kinda
clear, so
curious.
there's no projects proposed with this, and none of the lots that are proposed or included in this are owned by, well, actually, a couple of them are owned by the city, the train station itself, and a couple of the lots right around it. But so this isn't actually a proposal for any new development, it's just kind of resetting the rules for those properties right around that then private development would come in. You are right, if it's an affordable housing project, it's usually getting some type of grant or federal money. If there's any public money involved, then it is required to be prevailing wage. If it's a private development, then it's not required to be prevailing wage, and that's just market
Oh,
dynamics.
it's not?
No, that's
Inside a
correct.
federal sanction,
That's correct.
TOC?
Yeah, that's right. So that's a good question. So they're mandating, they're saying within this circle, you should make development kind of easier. or make it allowed to be more dense, basically. But they're not, because they're
sorry.
not putting any money involved,
Straight
it
to
doesn't
us.
trigger that.
That's time, and we can bring this topic back up outside of here, because we'll come back
Yeah.
for more questions and comments, so we'll
Okay,
kind of
all
talk
right,
through this a little.
but just to be clear, so.
But
outside
sorry,
that
sir, I
red
gotta
circle-
cut you off here.
Okay.
But we'll talk about it again.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Please don't call me ma'am. Hi. Yes, good evening. Question, and I know it might be outside of the scope, but the emergency evacuation planning, I would like to hear a lot more details about that, given that we've had catastrophes in the past decade, and we're in a two-lane road getting in and out. I would really like to know more about that. I did look on the website, I just didn't see a whole lot there. Thank you.
Yes, please.
My name is Linda Dixon, and I'm actually a little outside the radius of the TOC, but I'm concerned more about traffic, and I didn't hear that addressed at all. So if we can have some comments on that, that would be great. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Evan. I'm actually the tattoo shop owner of the one tattoo shop in Cotati. And I am just wondering, with these policy changes when they come through, is that going to be changing the process or any kind of like, you know, potential process for us or anybody else who wants to open a tattoo shop? Is that, because it's hopefully going to streamline it a little bit, but does that mean we still have more approvals we have to get through? Or how does that work?
We have a few minutes if you want to.
Yeah, so as proposed, tattoo shops, studios, whatever, will be proposed as a permitted use, just like a hair salon, so you get your business license.
And that's it.
Yeah, there's no use
more hoops?
permit. That's
Beautiful.
correct.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Adrienne Lobby, resident. I want to talk about parking. I heard two things. One, that we cannot, it's required, if we want this money, to not allow, not to require any parking spaces for either business or residential. That just seems really crazy to me, because everybody's got a car. I don't care how poor you are, how rich you are, you're gonna have a car. I mean, it just is true, and a lot of people have two cars. So I realize that we have a desire to apply for this money and put a good face on it, but I think that this might be something that we might want to do anyway. And even more important to me is the unbundling part of that. Because unbundling basically says, I'm a landlord, you're coming in, you're renting this apartment, you want the parking space, you're going to pay extra. And for people with good salaries and good money and, you know, okay, fine, I'll rent my parking space. But for poor people, that's a tax, that's an added cost. And it will really, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to predict that the landlords are going to be selling these parking spaces not necessarily to their tenants. And so the poor tenants are going to be parking on the curb. And so we have this nice thing here that says, let's have a place on the curb for all these different uses. Oh, we're having more delivery trucks and more Lyft and Uber type things. All that's so good. But the curbs are going to get entirely cramped and crowded, and we're going to all be driving around late at night going, how close can I get? Where can I park? So I really feel like this unbundling thing we should not do. And if it causes us a few less points and we can't figure out any other way to get those points, I would live with that. Thank you.
Any other public comments at this time? Carla, anybody on Zoom that would like to make a comment?
Yes, let's see, B1, you have the floor.
My name is Dave Angilder. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. First of all, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate that. Very articulate. The phrase proposed in TOC appeared many, many times in that presentation. I just want to be absolutely sure whenever we see that some policy is in the proposed in the TOC, what we're saying is that the affected parcels are only the dark green hashed parcels shown on the map early in the presentation.
That's correct.
All right. And then just for my clarification, there was a block of dark green hash that was sort of halfway between Oliver's and the train station. Is that the Chevron station?
Yes, I believe that's the Chevron station and the Size Sprouts daycare.
Okay. At the daycare center, I think.
Yeah, and then behind them, I think it's just a vacant lot at this time. Yeah. That's what that parcel was
Okay.
representing.
And then, so both of those are mostly commercial, and it sounds to me like the only residential areas that are in the dark green hashed are really those in Santero Way itself, correct?
Correct. Yeah, everything along East Cotati was commercial, except for the ones down Santera.
Okay, and then just amplifying this point, I mean, my main concern all along is parking, really. But the policies of maximum 1.5 spots per unit and the policy of unbundling parking, all of that also applies only to the dark green hashed areas, correct?
Correct.
All right, I'll stand down. Thank you.
I thought that the unbundling was for the entire city.
Unbundling is TOC only. Or if it's not, the commission, I can double check the language, but I believe so. And the commission can absolutely make that as a part of their recommendation.
Thank you. Carla, any other?
No further public comment.
All right, that will conclude our public comment period at this time. And we'll go back to the commission for any questions or comments before we make a recommendation.
I want to thank you all for coming tonight and for speaking. And I appreciate your concerns. And finding a way out of our cars is not going to be easy. And finding a way to put a place to put our car looks like it's not going to be easy. I don't like unbundling at all. I think that is, I don't trust. I don't trust it. I don't think that we are San Francisco. I don't think we have to sell our parking places here. I think that everything should be inclusive. If you rent a place, you have a parking place. That should be part of the plan. And I also agree with the speaker. If we lose a few points, I'm good with that on unbundling. I don't know how to deal with the fact that we are going to have more folks in our small town. It's going to happen with building. We will have more people and we will have more cars, and we have to find a way to get along, and we have to find a way to make it accessible and safe. And you're speaking to how do you get out in an emergency situation. This has got to be thought of now. All these things right now is the process. We have had emergencies. There have been a need to escape. The train station won't be running. We're going to be running for our cars or helping our neighbor who doesn't have a car. We're going to have to look out for each other. So this, in addition to the conversation here, we need to figure out how to take care of each other. And this is what we can do in a town like Cotati, which is why I'm so happy that we are Cotati and not San Francisco. We care about each other, I hope. when push comes to shove and when the fire is coming or something. So you're concerned about emergency access, exit, narrow streets. I mean, they make narrow streets so that it slows the traffic down. That was the point of Santero Way being narrow, was to slow down the traffic. And I understand that. Makes sense. And we need to be able to get in and get out safely and park. And, oh my. So I'm happy I'm just a commissioner and not a staff person. And folks who have property in the area, yeah, you have an opportunity. It looks like it's an opportunity. I don't know. And we're a small town and we need to have some extra money coming in. This OBAG funding, apparently it's important to us. I mean, I would like for the sidewalks to not have a gap like that too. I'd like to be able to walk along and not step in a pothole in my trail also. I don't think it's just streets. I think it is other things, walking paths and sidewalks, and even having a sidewalk. So, you know, there's a lot of ways we need to be able to get around safely. And just having you folks show up, I'm really grateful to you for taking your time this evening and showing up, and hopefully we can come together and help each other. And I love this trying to assist renters and not condoize, and the way that the city is being proactive about that, I'm very grateful for as well. And that's, I don't know if I've said anything, except I do not like unbundling. So I will be very clear about that. That's a big NO for me.
And to clarify, as written, it is citywide. You are correct.
Yes,
All of multifamily, you are correct.
Thank you, Shelley.
Yeah, on the topic of unbundling, like when I was reading through it, my assumption was that if the parking is no longer included with the cost of the housing, then the cost of the housing would be cheaper. Is that just me?
That's the code requirement. That's the code requirement.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just me being overly optimistic and not thinking, I guess I'm the only one who thought that. But I can see the point of like, okay, they're just gonna charge extra for the parking instead of it being included. So yeah, maybe that does change my perception of it, because I thought it made sense. But now after hearing that and hearing all the laughter in response to the way I interpreted it, I'm thinking I might be in the minority there. I mean, has there been studies or anything that shows that unbundling does end up costing more in the long run?
Well, so I think, you know, ABAG MTC is the Bay Area-wide governmental organization, and I will say I 100% think they are strongly influenced by the more urban communities like San Francisco, where you do pay extra for your parking. But I think the perspective that was raised tonight is probably much more valid in a community like Cotati.
Yeah, where it's gonna, instead of it being like, oh, where maybe if I were a landlord and seeing, oh, I can unbundle parking, I'd say, oh, well, maybe I'll charge a little less for rent because now people have to pay extra for parking, but maybe most landlords would say, oh, great, now I can just charge more for parking. Yeah, okay. I mean, I won't get into that, but, okay. That's all I had to say about that, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, you know, I'm kind of would like to dive more into unbundled parking, you know, why we included it here, where we see the benefits, kind of the downsides to it. Maybe if you can, with your experience, you know, provide a little bit more on that.
Sure, yeah, so this unbundled parking is one of the mandates that came, so it's not one of the policy choices. It wasn't a selection that we could make compared to other things. It was, you shall unbundle. And I do think it's kind of from a more urban perspective where folks are provided an incentive to not drive cars by being able to pay less for their units. But I also say the flip side of that is there's a lot more access to transit and just it's easier to get around when you have more density of, you know, it's a more intense community in the East Bay, Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, those kind of three big major cities where it's easier to get around without a
Yeah.
car.
You can survive without a car, whereas
Correct.
here, it's not as easy, yeah.
And so even what we've talked about or experienced is even if, say you worked in Santa Rosa and lived in Cotati and you could walk to the train station, you still need that, it's called that last mile, you know, you still need the ability to go from the train to where your place of work is or the grocery store, those types of things. And we're just not really set up as a community to be able to provide that full service, circulation way to get around without an automobile.
So if the unbundling is a requirement of the TOC, then if we didn't implement it, we wouldn't qualify for that funding, like, period, right?
No, so it's a spectrum of compliance, and so
Okay.
the bottom, there's a page in the staff report that kind
Got
of
it.
tries to identify.
Yeah, I see. So we would just have fewer points available
We
to
would
us.
we wouldn't get those points
Yeah.
there.
And we don't know how many points are tied to the TOC, or to the unbundling, or
To
do
the
we?
bundle, that's right, there is actually a score sheet that does break it down category by category. But as staff said, as drafted, we shot for fully compliant, and we know that I'm not aware of any jurisdiction that's going to be fully compliant. So if the commission and the community is concerned about that, we can absolutely bring that to the city council. And I can try to drill down and get some more specifics by the time we present to the council on what kind of that ding would be, so they could have an informed perspective on the bundling.
And, oh, I see, we have a hand in the audience, can we address?
Oh, why don't you just keep going?
So to finish my thought, I guess, like, so we have to balance things, right? So if it's a ton of points for the unbundling and we're losing out on a lot, then maybe is there a compromise that we say, okay, the unbundling only applies in the TOC area and not citywide?
That would absolutely be valid in a way
Yeah.
to comply, but not have it be as broad of an impact.
Okay. I mean, if it's a few points, then get rid of it altogether, but if it's like a lot of points, then maybe that's a effective balance. And then knowing also that if a developer comes to us and says, hey, we want to build this 9-story apartment complex with no parking, it probably wouldn't get approved, I'm guessing, because we need parking. I don't know. Like, would it have to go through, like,
Well, so we couldn't deny it based on the lack of parking because we are not.
oh, that's right,
allowed-
we don't have parking
We're
minimums.
not allowed to have parking minimums.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but just to give some background, we've never seen a project come through with no parking
Yeah.
because people who live in Cotati need parking and the developers recognize that. And so they want it to be, you know, competitive with the market. So they don't take away parking completely. Which, even with the unbundling, I mean, there's gonna be market forces that drive the developers or the people providing the housing to make their units competitive to other apartment buildings in the area where they would allow parking, or they'd have to provide a lower rental rate. So it's not just landlords have this magic, you know, power over the rental market. They have to, you know, adjust based on what market rates are driving at the, you know, in the area as well. So a single landlord can't just dictate, you know, I'm gonna charge this much more and not provide parking. Because they're competing with other landlords and other rental units in the area. So, and that, like, on that sense, I don't know how, you know, I think there's some consideration maybe that we need to understand how much of an impact it would be on the rating, and then kind of go from there to make a more informed decision on that. Do you know, in the past, have we had to do this, you know, have we gone through the OBAG compliance process to get this grant funding? How was it done, like, in the last couple of years?
Yes, so this is gonna be, we're in OBAG cycle 3 right now. And OBAG cycle 4 is the next one, which is, I think, April 26 is when they're gonna announce the funding. So we're trying to get teed up for compliance, for the next cycle. OBAG 2 had a complete streets requirement, and so the city had to adopt an ordinance saying, you know, we were going to, anytime we built a new street, we were going to have bike lanes, we were going to have sidewalks, we were going to make sure we provided for all means of circulation. And that was 100% in keeping it in line with the perspective on the council, and so that was a priority already, and so it wasn't concerning or that significant of a change to formalize that with an ordinance or a resolution for OBAG 2. OBAG 3, my understanding is a lot of the requirements were around equity and some of the ways that we contracted for the people who did the work. So that's kind of already baked into a lot of the governmental contracting requirements, as was alluded to by the speaker. There's just a lot of mandates when there's public money involved, even for the road work that gets done. And I think a lot of the OBAG 3 requirements were focused on that. But again, I'm not 100% sure because that stuff isn't what comes through our department. It's a public works and
So
city
it's
management.
different years had different
Correct.
processes for
Correct.
for gaining the money. Okay. I want to just touch on this gentleman's comment about the prevailing wages for different types of projects, and if we can maybe get some more clarity. I'm not an expert in that. I'm not sure if you have any understanding of that and could.
Yeah, so anytime there's public money involved, it has to be done through a bidding process and it has to be prevailing wage paid. And so he is correct that a lot of affordable housing projects are funded by some type of public money, so then there are prevailing wage requirements, so then that does add to the cost. Typically, affordable housing is actually some of the most expensive housing to get built, and that's why it needs so much subsidy. So it's kind of a double-edged sword as you subsidize the project with federal or with public money because it's affordable housing and you're supporting that, and then that adds to the cost of constructing it because there's mandates that you pay a higher wage to the people doing the work because it's publicly funded, and then so it's a challenge. But while there very easily could be affordable housing projects proposed in this area, none of the rule changes are mandating that any affordable housing, 100% affordable housing projects move forward. The affordable housing mandate is that 15% of any market rate project that gets built provide affordable housing. And that's already a citywide rule. And that level of affordability typically does not trigger public funding involved, so it wouldn't trigger that prevailing wage issue. And to be clear, there are no new taxes being proposed as a part of any of these changes. I think one to point to that issue, there have been some bond measures considered for the entire Bay Area to try to fund affordable housing. And that, I think the gentleman is accurate in that is a way that affordable housing often gets built, and there has been some governmental agencies looking to try to get more bonds, which the most recent one was called BAFA, Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, and they were proposing to put a bond on the last presidential election. It didn't make that election because I think they had some type of an issue with their language, and that would have been a parcel tax. And I think it was resulting in $10 per $100,000 of assessed value, or maybe 20. It never got finalized, so I don't remember the numbers. But that is, to the gentleman's point, I think that's how some additional taxes may get proposed, and that was at a Bay Area region-wide. And then if that money's available, an affordable housing developer may look to some of the opportunity sites around these transit areas because they're now going to allow higher density and have less parking and be kind of more streamlined for entitlements and development. But I think market rate developers are going to have those same incentives.
And then I'm just kind of going through some of the comments we've got so we can kind of make sure we discuss
What everybody had questions about. I know in the past when we've talked about Santero Way, we've talked about, emergency evacuation and the concerns around that with a one-way in and out street. I know we've looked at other emergency access routes. The SMART train, train line creates a lot of issues with that. But can you maybe talk a little bit about, some of the options that have been explored in the past. for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a great comment and super important for everyone to consider. So the emergency evacuation and access planning is typically done on a project level. And so when a specific project comes forward, the fire department's involved and they're making sure that emergency vehicle access is provided, circulation is adequate. They get involved in everything from, how far your building is from your property line, do you have a staging area for ladder trucks, et cetera. But at this level of kind of decision-making, we don't get that granular. But I will say, when we did the specific plan for Santero Way, which is a majority of the properties that are affected by these policies, we have done evacuation route planning. There are 2 emergency vehicle access circulation routes that are included in Santero Way and in that specific plan, that as development happens, they have to implement and make sure that those secondary and third routes are available for evacuation and emergency vehicle access. And then the last thing I'd point to is any project over 50 units is required to have a dedicated evacuation route defined as a part of their project. Most likely, any project that we see other than on some of those smaller lots on East Cotati are going to be over 50 units, just given the size of the parcels. And so additional emergency access and evacuation routes would have to be provided. And then the last thing, speaking to the narrowness of Santero, that was absolutely recognized as an impediment to people being able to get out. And the new street standard for Santero is actually significantly wider from where the new development would occur out to East Cotati. It requires Santero to be wider to address that very concern. And that was a mandate from the fire department.
Is there a distinction between emergency vehicle routes and evacuation routes?
They're 2 different things.
Okay.
That's absolutely right. So every project has to have what we call EVA, emergency vehicle access. So it's everybody's driving down the street to get out. How are you going to be able to get or there's an accident that blocks that street. What secondary access point do you have for literally you to be able to drive the fire truck in, or the ambulance or the police car, those things. An evacuation route is kind of higher level planning where it's full-on circulation of vehicles exiting while emergency vehicle is showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 2 different things and 2 different thought processes.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah, can you elaborate on what you meant by the Santero Way street would need to be wider? Like, are you talking they would actually widen the existing street, or just new streets that they pave in the development would need to be wider than the existing street?
Yeah, so there's 2 things there. One, the current Santero Way was built it's like the narrowest public street I think that we have in town. And so from the edge of the current development north, as new properties develop, the street would be widened to provide just wider lanes and more circulation. A project that was most recently approved called Cotati Station, it's a 100-unit apartment project that's approved on Santero on the vacant lot on the east side of Santero, adjacent to the parking lot, was required as a condition to widen the street down further down towards the cul-de-sac where it necks down to address this issue that we have for people who are in Santero. They're really frustrated because they can't park on their street overnight. And they have limited parking already, so then there's a lot of frustration we heard. And so, and I don't want to say future development will require that because that was specific to that project, but we are well aware of the concerns of parking in Santero and the limitations on the hours of that parking, and we have looked to every tool available, including requiring new projects to fix that deficiency if they're going to be approved and move forward.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon's comment, I know you want to learn more about traffic. Are you talking specifically on Santero Way?
No, I'm even thinking East Cotati.
East Cotati as well.
Because you're going to have denser population. It's already in commute hours, pretty
Okay.
heavy traffic through there, so just concerned.
In general in that area.
It's going to get worse.
You're right. I can say just from a higher level, obviously having access to the funding from ABAG allows us to continue to improve the roads and the infrastructure, so that, you know, is one benefit of coming into compliance with this whole process. As far as Santero specific, Director Hausch, you know, has been mentioning how we are working to get the developers to widen that road to make it more accessible. I don't, and maybe you can talk on this, I don't know if there's anything on the capital improvements plan in the near term. That's, you know, something more for Public Works, but.
Yeah, so we absolutely acknowledge what you're saying. Right now, East Cotati Avenue can be very impacted by traffic, primarily Roner Park folks coming and going through town to get to the highway. And future, more people living on that street. There's only so, it's a main corridor through town, so it will absolutely affect traffic, and there's no way to say it will not. However, we have identified some, what we call mitigation, so ways to reduce the impacts, and it's basically signals. So we've identified a new signal at LaSalle that's in the capital, so it's something we're planning to put in, and potentially one at even Charles Street. You know, they have to be timed really well. You know, we're looking at some other things so that as the city moves forward with developing the 120 site, so the one right across from the fire station, we're looking at like how do people access that property? Where does the merge happen? Does that change? So basically, it's a combination of kind of looking citywide and looking where you would install infrastructure to keep things flowing, and then also looking at project by project specific things. And so any specific development comes forward, we'll do a traffic study, and it'll analyze all the ways people are going to come and go and make recommendations that then the city will consider to force them to implement. But without a doubt, more people living in town will result in more people driving on the streets.
Yeah, and I want to take another step back too, and, you know, talk a little bit about the state mandates that are being put on the cities and counties in California to build more housing. And the goals, they're called REMA numbers, which are basically numbers that every city and every county in the area is required to build new housing in over the next 5 or 7 years.
It's an 8-year cycle.
It's an 8-year cycle. And so as Cotati, since I've been on the Planning Commission, we're tracked based on how well we're doing to meet that goal of housing that is being pushed down from the region and from the state. And if cities or counties do not meet those numbers, then they're punished in a way, and a lot of the control that we still have over the development is taken away, and developers can really come in and kind of push pretty unsavory projects onto communities. And so we, you know, as a commission, as staff, as the council, do our best to meet those numbers so that we're able to retain the control that we can. So with that being said, you know, there is more housing being built in Cotati, and as a result, there is going to be, you know, more impacts on the roadways and on the traffic. And I think the staff does a good job of, you know, finding ways that we can get the grant funding possible to implement, you know, traffic control measures, improve the roadways, do things like that. This is one of those options. And then also, you know, this is hopefully a long-term goal, but, you know, encouraging people to use more of the trails and more public transit and things like that. And that's part of the reason why you put housing, you know, next to a train station. So I just wanted to kind of make that comment as to why it's important, or why, you know, we're required to do a lot of, you know, approve a lot of these housings and bring, you know, create housing for people to live in. So that's just something that I think people, you know, we should have a little background on.
Well, I'd like to say we've approved a lot of housing. There has not been anything built in
Yeah.
all of the things that we have approved, Ryan. I don't think one thing has been built. So what's going on with, let me just ask you, Noah, what's going on with building?
Yeah, I'll give a summary during the department report.
Okay.
Yeah, we can come back to that at the end. Let's just stay on this agenda item. I mean, I will just say real quick, you know, we can only approve it. We're not the ones actually building it. Can we just talk real quick about So just, I guess we've talked about parking, we've talked about the unbundling. The individual on Zoom asked about parking requirements in the TOC. I think we've kind of clarified that, but it was the parcels with the green hash marks, those are the ones that are proposed to be unbundled, and then also have the minimum, no minimum and a maximum of 1.5 per unit, correct? In
So the minimum and maximum is proposed to be, sorry, to clarify, as written, the unbundling is citywide for
Citywide.
apartment projects, but we can take direction to modify that and make that part of the recommendation to the city council. Sorry, I'm trying to double check the parking number.
So we're going to vote on this.
Yes, we
And
need a
and
vote.
my vote is going to be no on unbundling, period.
Absolutely.
Period. In the TOC or in the city, doesn't matter. So it's not passing. So just letting you know.
And the 1.5 spaces per unit maximum and per 250 square foot of commercial space is in TOC only,
Okay.
as written.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission at this time?
The gentleman had his hand up. Are we able?
Yeah, I know. We structure the meetings where we have to have like a set public comment period. I can open it back up to public comment, and I'll just give everybody the option to speak for another minute if they'd like. So,
I was just thinking about some of your challenges within the model.
Oh, sir, could you please come up to the
yeah,
podium?
just one second. Thanks.
Within the city or the state, what other models are following this jurisdiction right now that you could maybe use as a proactive feed to get some of these questions answered and to help, facilitate what you're trying to answer and do, right?
Are you talking about other cities? or counties
Absolutely.
we can
Who
look
else
at?
is under this umbrella with this format that they've developed, the state? It's just a question.
Yeah.
That might be your great ally for you guys to reach out and to look at that, to get more answers and to help facilitate this thing. Secondly, I just want to ask you one more time. The red, so they didn't reprint it. It was in there for a reason, and I'm not even going to go into that, but anything outside of that, it's off the charts. Right. Okay, because I wouldn't even be here probably if it wasn't for that. So, and then what was your position?
My name's Noah Housh. I'm Community Development Director for the city, so I manage building, planning,
Okay.
housing, and code
Yeah, I
enforcement.
couldn't tell if you were part of SMART or the TOC
No, no.
development.
But I have cards back here, and I'm happy to stay as
Okay.
long after the meeting as anybody wants to answer as many questions
Yeah.
as you all have.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah. That's it. Just a little feedback on a model that's already in play
Yep.
within the state, with this size, with these current or common problems, that maybe it'll help.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll open it back up for anybody else that has a comment. And I don't think you spoke earlier.
My name is Heather Milazzo, and I'm a homeowner on Centero Way. And I'm kind of surprised that I feel like we haven't talked enough about the actual stuff that's happening on Centero Way. But right now, I just have to ask you, how do you plan on widening that street? Where it's the most narrow, those townhouses come to the edge of the street, then there's the sidewalk and the parking. So unless you're talking about tearing down some of that development, how is that even possible?
Any other comments from the public at this time? Thank you. We'll close public comment period again. No, do you want to?
Sure,
Take a
yeah.
stab at that?
So regarding the first question, TOC, so this is relatively new. I think we're actually the first jurisdiction in Sonoma County to be bringing forward a TOC ordinance. We've been meeting with the Sonoma County Transit Authority. and all the other jurisdictions kind of hearing where they're at and what their status is regarding implementation. But we're the first in the county and one of the first in the Bay Area to be moving this forward. One of the reasons is because we had done the Santero Way specific plan update. We had gotten that grant to do that before they even announced the TOC program. And so we were ahead of the curve in understanding where that was going. And then also, staff just took advantage of that knowledge that we have to get out in front of it with the goal of trying to be as competitive as possible and get as much of that OBAG money as we could, just because, by the nature of us being first with Santero, we have a good understanding. We kind of were already making progress on this effort, and so we just wanted to be able to get as much money for Cotati as we could from that Bay Area grant program. We absolutely are coordinating and collaborating with other communities. It's a Bay Area-wide program, and they do give a lot of options as to how you do it, and as I mentioned, a lot of them are just throw money at the problem. Cotati isn't in a place to be able to do that, and so we were looking for ways to comply that would kind of minimize impacts, but then also take credit for things we're already doing and keep the thread of complying with state mandates going. Getting to the widening, so there's a project called Cotati Station. It was a 100-unit apartment project that was approved, I think, in 2022 on the vacant land adjacent to the parking lot on the east side of Santero. As a condition of approval of that, they were required to widen, I believe it's the portion of Santero Way that's in front of the park. So no homes would be demolished, none of the current development, but it was a way to try to widen out Santero at one of the narrower points to try to deal with that no street parking at night issue. We coordinated with the fire department, asked them what would be required in order for that sign to go away and people to be able to park on night, and they gave us direction and there's specific conditions, and I believe we have a design. If it's not a drawn design, we have a description saying exactly what areas would be widened, and I can share that information. Because it is likely to carry through to future developments because we're trying to respond to the existing residents' concerns and figure out ways to be able to change that built environment, but also not impact the people who live there. And we don't want to take away anything of what people have that they like.
I think we can move for a vote at this time. Do we have a motion?
So with the unbundling, I'm just curious because we've talked about removing it from maybe the citywide part, maybe removing it altogether. How would that
How we're
impact
gonna
what we
handle
vote? Yeah.
I'm not really, when I think about it, I mean, even when we talk about allowing unbundling, the concern, I guess, is that people that don't live in the area would come in and rent those parking spaces, and then there would be less parking available to people in the area.
And I think the hardship on lower income people who maybe can't.
Yeah, I guess I just don't see people not living in the area coming in and renting parking spaces. I imagine it would just be somebody else in the area that wants to rent a parking space. So the parking stays in the area regardless of where it goes, and it allows for more flexibility and pricing for units. So I don't really see as big of a concern with it. I think I would like to know what kind of hit it would take before I've made a decision on that, but I mean, we have to make a decision tonight, so.
Yeah. So then can our decision be, I see Shelley has something to say.
I think
I'll let you-
unbundling will disproportionately affect poor and working class people. Everybody has a car, Ryan, everybody. And why is it okay for some people to afford a parking place and not others? This is an issue for all of Cotati, not for only the people who can afford Cotati. So I'm living in Cotati. I am a low-income person. I happen to be on this commission. And unbundling will affect me. And I cannot afford to pay more for a parking place. So we need to think about Cotati, all the residents of Cotati. We are not just here for the rich people or the people who can afford to have to pay for an unbundled parking place. So do not disproportionately take it out on low income and poor people. Everybody has a car. And sometimes the car is the second option, the home. We're all that close.
Okay.
So this matters to me. And I am offended by your words tonight.
Okay. I didn't mean to offend anybody. I was just trying to explore the issue a little further. I guess I'm still trying to understand it, and I appreciate your comments. At this point,
I would like to make, if we take unbundled out, I would move to approve this as written without the unbundled.
Okay. You want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Move to approve without unbundled.
Anybody second?
I mean, personally, I'd kind of like to get more information about the unbundling before we strip it out altogether. I mean, Shelley, I definitely respect your perspective.
Thank you.
I think that, you know, I personally don't have enough information. Like, I don't know how much it would cost to get a parking spot. I don't know how it would impact, you know, rental prices. Like, I don't know how many points it is in the TOC grading scale, you know, like, I just feel like we don't have enough information about that. And, yeah, that's kind of my thought on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree as well. I just don't feel like I have enough information to make an informed recommendation on this. So I think I would recommend that we keep it as it is, and then, you know, provide some of that background to the council. So when they are the ones that are ultimately voting on this, they have that information to make that decision. And we can word it, you know, in our recommendation that it's very clear that this was a topic that was very important to the community, and that we feel like they need more background on in order to make that decision.
So there's a motion on the table. If there's no second, the motion will die, and we'll need another motion. Or it could be seconded with an amendment, a proposed amendment regarding additional information being provided to inform the council's decision on it.
Is that an option where we say, okay, we'll approve it as written with this kind of caveat that more information needs to be provided to council for them to make a final decision? And like, do we need to specify what information needs to be provided, or is that just kind of open-ended?
Well, what I heard was that the goal would be to provide, try to estimate actual cost of parking spaces, and then the actual score impact. So that way, council would have that information when they're making their decision.
Yeah.
I don't think you can estimate a cost of a parking place. It's what the market will bear. We live in a capitalist society. It can be more than the rent. Who knows? Who knows? It's what the market will bear. And there is no way for the city to say you can't charge this much. We cannot legislate it. The city isn't making money on it.
Oh, that's correct. That's correct.
So you can't, I'm not going to believe the numbers that you come up with about what a parking place will cost. I mean, you can for San Francisco maybe, but I believe that it is what the market will bear, especially in that area. where parking will be a premium. A premium.
Can we get as specific as to say that the affordable housing cannot be unbundled?
So there, a second factor of this is the enforcement. So, staff's already kind of concerned over how, so, under the language, it's mandated that the rent price has to be less than the rent plus the parking space. So that's mandated in the code language. So staff would look to see leasing options for new developments and ask to see example contracts and all of those things. But trying to then, I haven't ever been tasked with enforcing parking, and so I don't have a good model program to point to or experience in the department to be able to know exactly how that would be done.
Right. And on the flip side, a landlord could unbundle a unit, and that's not allowed to be unbundled.
Correct.
And-
How would we know? Yeah.
And how would you know?
Wait, can you say that again?
When it comes to enforcement, on the other side of it, a landlord could go and illegally unbundle a unit and just provide a unit up for rent while parking could be separated.
Oh, like
And then-
today they could do that
I mean,
without it
yeah,
being?
or,
yeah.
after this passes.
I see, uh-huh.
He's saying that enforcement of this one way or the other would be a challenge.
Yeah. Hypothetically, what would happen if we didn't approve, like, let's say we couldn't reach an agreement and we don't approve this motion or this ordinance recommendation, what happens then?
So if the ordinance doesn't get a, I mean, sorry, if the motion doesn't get a second, the motion fails, we would ask for another second. I mean, the options before the commission tonight are, move to approve with modifications and recommendations, move to deny with modifications or recommendations, or continue to ask for more information to be provided.
Okay, so would that mean potentially like another, like, it doesn't go to council on the 18th if we can't agree on something?
Correct.
And
If
then
it
we
was,
would have
if it was
another-
voted to be continued, that's correct.
Okay. What would that do to like our TOC compliance timeline?
Well, it would affect the schedule.
Yeah.
We would have to renotice it because we already have notice. The goal is to try to get it in place by the end of the year.
Okay,
So again, to tee us up to be very competitive
Yeah.
as OBAG drops. From the staff perspective, respectfully to the commission, obviously it's a big decision. If there were some parameters that would make it acceptable or not, like a 10-point hit to the score or, some actual defined number, it would be helpful to bring to the council, because it seems like there's general support and it's one issue that remains. So staff would appreciate the commission being able to kind of elaborate on their concerns. And even, you could even carve out that one section to say you couldn't agree on this, but you support everything else, and then allow the council to make the ultimate decision.
okay. Thank you, that's helpful. What do you all think, based on that information?
I mean, I'm still under the impression that I just don't have enough information to go to pull that out right now. And so I'm inclined to approve it as written with the amendment that we require that more information be provided to council, who ultimately is the one that's going to approve the ordinance or not, to help inform their decision.
Yeah, Shelley? We know how you feel.
You know what I'm gonna do, so
Okay.
no, that's not gonna happen for me.
And
I will move to approve this ordinance without the unbundling part. And you can offer the council information about the unbundling, but I will not approve this ordinance with the unbundling.
so I'm cognizant of the fact that we have two commissioners absent today, so if Shelley's not on board, as long as unbundling is included, then it's not gonna pass. Is essentially,
Well, and if unbundling is not on board, then Ryan will. So,
Well, I think it only requires a 2-1 vote.
Oh, does it?
to pass.
no.
Or
It's
is
a
it
majority of
majority?
the quorum tonight.
Oh, majority of quorum, not majority of
2-1 would
commissioners?
pass.
Oh, 2-1 would pass, okay. Well, good, thank you for clarifying that, because, yeah, I was assuming that it would be majority vote commission, so we would all have to be unanimous in order for it to pass, so. Yeah, I mean, my personal thought on this transit-oriented communities in general is like, I know the ultimate goal is to reduce the reliance on automobiles long-term, right? Like, that's our goal as a city, larger community. I mean, we can't keep planning for a future where automobiles are the number one mode of transportation for everybody. Like, it's, I mean, easier said than done, of course, especially in a city like Cotati or an area like Sonoma County where everything is so far apart. It's not like we live in New York City or San Francisco where there's mass transportation or everything you need in a half-mile radius. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough decision for sure. I mean, You said no, we could say that we agree on everything except for this one piece, and council could take that under consideration and make their decision? Because yeah, like you said, we're not deciding anything tonight, we're just recommending, yeah.
Yeah, I would be comfortable with that.
And what type, like what information, what specific information would be helpful for your staff to get from us in order to provide more direction to the council, like points? What else? Because I don't want to send you guys on a wild goose chase asking for information that can't be obtained.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, the whole point of this effort is to gain a high score in our grant competitiveness, right? In addition to all of the land use things we talked about and the bigger policy of changing and intensifying land uses near transit for all the social benefits. So if there was a point threshold that the commission was interested in identifying as something that might be acceptable, and I understand it's hard to do that because we're going to be graded against all the other jurisdictions, and so you don't really know until you see how other people are scoring. So that's a challenge. And then the other thing would be just staff would do, trying to price out current rates of parking spaces. But Commissioner Berman's point is right, that's in today's snapshot, and that's a sample that we would just be finding of public information. And then I guess the last one would be, if the council were to move forward with unbundling, should it just be TOC only or citywide? And I think that's another third distinction that could be made.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and before I say what I was gonna say, we could change this in the future, right? Like if we decide,
Absolutely.
let's go yes on bundling, and then, we don't like it, we can always change it later, okay. Or vice versa, okay. I mean, yeah, personally, I'm inclined to say unbundling and TOC only. I don't see a reason to have it citywide. It makes sense near a train station where people could hypothetically get by without having a car easier than they could, over by Lowe's. I feel comfortable with that recommendation. And then, yeah, asking to get more information about points and then, yeah, cost estimates if any are available.
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion? Okay, sure, yeah.
So, hold on, so we had a motion on the table, and just to be sure, it seems like that's not going to get a second?
I am not going to second that motion. I want more information on unbundling before I yank it out completely.
Yeah. Good.
So that motion failed.
Sorry, Shelley. Okay, so I guess I'll motion to approve the ordinance with the, what's the word, caveat, with the I don't know, whatever, requirement that the unbundling apply to the transit-oriented communities only, not citywide, and that staff obtain information regarding how many points are tied to the unbundling and estimates on how much unbundling increases the cost of overall housing in comparable, communities, or just any communities, and identifying, okay, this is San Francisco, this is Oakland, this is, I don't know, El Sobrante, Yeah, that's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
Carla?
Commissioner Berman,
No.
Commissioner Sparks,
Yes.
Vice Chair Long.
Yes. All right, that motion passes. Let's go back to our agenda. Thank you, Director Hausch. That was a lot of information, so I appreciate you walking all of us through that. Reports by staff.
Yeah, just briefly, and to identify, I'm happy to stay after and answer any questions that remain, chat with folks. Just briefly, department report. So we have the Climate Ready Katati Fair. That'll be the second annual, so we scheduled that at the train station last year, or in March of this year. It was a big success, lots of community support, and so we are scheduling the next one for March 28th of 2026. It'll be back at the Smart Station. And there's all kinds of information and a lot of opportunities for, we're gonna have a fix-it fair, so if people have broken things, there's gonna be clothing swap, there'll be food, there'll be activities, lots of ways to improve your sustainability, so we hope the community comes on out for that. We only have 3 planning commission meetings left in the year. The next one is November 17th, and we are likely to have a meeting to review a housing proposal, so just know that. And then I can send out the schedule for the remaining. It's December 1st and December 15th are the other dates, so please check your calendars, be thoughtful about that. And then lastly, to talk about a summary of kind of where projects are that have been approved. So the City Council and Commission have approved a pretty significant amount of development out on 116. 2 large apartment projects and 1 condominium project. The condominium project is moving forward to construction. They've been working on what's called their improvement plans, so kind of the design, the engineering level design of all the infrastructure, all those things. And that's the site that is directly south of Lowe's, directly behind the Chinese food restaurant. And that's 125 condominiums and 44 below market rate apartment units. And they're moving to construction and hope to break ground in early 2026. The developer who got the adjacent 2 apartment projects approved sold them to another developer, and that other developer, they're in Petaluma, so they're local and they're really excited about the site, but they only have so much capacity and they're completely focused on building out some projects over in the Sacramento area. Once they complete those, they've indicated to us that they plan to pivot over and start construction on what's called Katati Village 1 and 2. That's kind of directly behind Acre Pizza, and then across from that site on Alder and 116, kind of south of the villages, or I'm sorry, the cottages. So the approved projects are still engaging with us and still talking to us about their schedule, but those projects are probably not going to break ground until 2027 for those ones.
And the hotel?
And the hotel, they've said they've gotten their financing and are hoping to move into construction to winterize the site in the next 2 weeks. That's what they told us most recently, so.
Cool. That'll be nice.
Any update on the dead oak tree for the, that park?
Yeah, so it's, as you're identified, so one of the oak trees on the Katati Redwood Row project was planned around. The developer intended to make it a central feature of the development, and it is unfortunately been killed by a beetle. We have a new beetle that's killing oak trees And Cotati's the furthest south it's been found, is what the arborist said. They haven't proposed any alternative design. They're still trying to figure out what to do, I think, whether they replace it with a large specimen tree of a different species, whether they plant a grove of trees, whether they put more oaks there. They're trying to evaluate all those options.
Okay, but they're aware of it and.
Oh, yeah, they're
planning for
definitely
it?
aware of it.
Yeah,
They brought it to our attention. So they're trying to make a plan, and they're kind of uncertain as to which way to go. Plant more oaks, are they going to be more susceptible? So they're looking for alternative species that are resistant to this beetle. They're kind of evaluating options.
Okay.
All right.
That concludes the department report.
Okay. Reports by Planning Commission. Nothing for me?
Nothing from me. Actually, you know what? I'm going to be out of town on the 17th, so I will not be able to attend that meeting. I can email you as well if you need it in writing. Okay, thank you.
And then information received after the agenda was posted.
Thank you. We did receive one public comment, and that was provided to the Planning Commission
there
for
we go.
review. And there's copies in the back, and then we also amended the agenda. It'll be added to the agenda for public review.
Thank you. With that, I will adjourn at 7:45.
Thank you.